Imagine finding a penny so ordinary it almost gets ignored, yet so closely watched by collectors that one tiny detail can turn it from pocket change into a serious prize. Today, we're looking at a coin that proves how even the most common-looking pennies can carry hidden stories and surprising value. This is the 1954 D mint mark Lincoln penny. At first glance, it looks like a typical old copper cent. Abraham Lincoln's familiar portrait on the front, wheat ears on the back, a small letter D beneath the date. Millions were made, and for decades they passed quietly through American hands. But behind that simple appearance is a story tied to post-war America, changing mint technology, and a few small quirks that collectors still search for today. The 1954 D Lincoln penny was struck at the Denver Mint. The letter D below the date tells us exactly where it was made. This was part of the long-running Lincoln Wheat Cent series, which began in 1909 and ran until 1958. By 1954, the design was already deeply familiar to Americans. People didn't think of these coins as special. They were tools of everyday life, used to buy candy, newspapers, and a gallon of gas for just a few cents. To understand this coin, we need to step back into the year 1954. The United States was in the middle of a period of growth and optimism. World War II was nearly a decade in the past. Families were moving into new homes. Highways were expanding. Industry was booming. The U.S. Mint was busy producing coins to keep up with a growing economy, and pennies were needed in massive quantities. That year, the Denver Mint struck over 251 million Lincoln cents. That's a huge number, and it's one reason why most 1954 D pennies are not rare today. They were made to circulate, not to be saved. Almost every one of them entered daily use, bouncing from pocket to pocket, cash register to cash register. The coin itself was made from a bronze alloy, about 95% copper, with small amounts of tin and zinc. This gives the penny its warm, reddish-brown color when new. Over time, most examples turned darker, especially those that saw heavy circulation. Because copper reacts with air and moisture, every surviving penny today has its own unique tone and surface appearance. On the front of the coin, you see Victor David Brenner's famous portrait of Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln faces to the right, with the word Liberty behind him and the date 1954 in front. Below the date sits the small D mint mark, quietly identifying Denver as the place of origin. On the back, two wheat stalks frame the words 1 cent and United States of America. At the top, you see the phrase E pluribus unum. This simple design became one of the most recognizable coins in American history and remained unchanged for decades. So why do collectors care about the 1954 D penny if so many were made? The answer lies in condition, small variations, and the thrill of finding something overlooked. In worn condition, a typical 1954 D penny is worth only a few cents. Many are still found in old jars, drawers, and inherited collections. But when condition improves, value begins to rise. A penny that still has strong detail, sharp lettering, and minimal wear can attract attention. Coins that retain their original red copper color, known as red cents, are especially desirable. The real excitement comes with errors and unusual features. One of the most talked about varieties linked to 1954 pennies involves mint mark anomalies. While the most famous repunched mint mark varieties are often associated with other years, collectors still carefully inspect 1954 D cents for signs of doubling or irregularities around the mint mark. These are small details, often invisible without magnification, but they can make a big difference. Another area collectors examine is the date and lettering. Slight doubling, uneven strikes, or misaligned elements can signal a mint error. These mistakes happened during high-speed production, and most were caught and destroyed. A few escaped into circulation, and those survivors are what collectors hope to find. There are also off-metal strikes and planchet errors, though these are rare. A penny struck on the wrong metal or with an improperly prepared blank can be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars, depending on the error and condition. Auction records show that, while ordinary circulated examples sell for modest amounts, high-grade uncirculated 1954 D pennies can bring impressive prices. Coins graded in near-perfect condition by professional grading services have sold for hundreds of dollars, especially when they display full original red color and sharp detail. These are the coins that were somehow saved early, tucked away, and forgotten for decades. Identifying a genuine 1954 D penny is straightforward, but knowing what to look for makes all the difference. First, check the date. It should read 1954 clearly, with even spacing and consistent font. Next, look just below the date for the D mint mark. On authentic coins, the mint mark is part of the original strike, not added later. It should not look glued on, scratched in, or unusually raised. The weight is another clue. A genuine bronze Lincoln penny from this era should weigh about 3.11 grams. Significant deviation could indicate damage, wear, or a counterfeit. The coin should also not be magnetic, since copper-based pennies do not stick to magnets. Surface texture matters too. Real coins show natural wear patterns and aging. Artificially altered coins may have unusual shine, rough patches, or tool marks. When in doubt, serious collectors rely on magnification and eventually professional grading services to confirm authenticity. There are some fun and surprising details about the 1954 D penny that many people don't realize. For one, these coins were struck during a time when pennies had real purchasing power. In the mid-1950s, a single cent could buy more than you might expect today. That's part of why so many were used heavily and worn down. Another interesting fact is that despite their age, many 1954 D pennies still exist in large numbers because people began saving wheat cents once the design changed in 1959. When the Lincoln Memorial replaced the wheat ears, Americans suddenly realized the older pennies were something different. Jars, albums, and envelopes began filling up with wheat cents, preserving coins that might otherwise have been lost. Collectors also enjoy comparing pennies from different mints in the same. Most people would walk right past this penny without a second thought. It looks ordinary. It feels ordinary. But the 1967 Lincoln penny without a mint mark hides a story that connects economic crisis, government decisions, and a quiet chapter of American coin history that many people still don't understand. This coin is the 1967 Lincoln 1-cent piece, often called the 1967 no mint mark penny. If you look at it closely, you'll notice something missing. There is no letter under the date. No D, no S. No mint mark at all. That missing letter is not a mistake. It is part of the story. In 1967, the United States was dealing with a serious coin shortage. Americans were saving coins, not spending them. Rising silver prices made people believe coins might soon be worth more as metal than money. Stores struggled to make change. Vending machines went empty. The U.S. Treasury needed a solution, and fast. To stop people from hoarding coins, the government made a bold decision. From 1965 through 1967, the U.S. Mint removed mint marks from almost all coins. The idea was simple. If people couldn't tell where a coin was made, they would be less likely to save certain versions. All pennies made during those years looked nearly identical, no matter which mint produced them. That is why the 1967 Lincoln penny has no mint mark. Even though many were struck in Philadelphia and others in Denver or San Francisco, none of them carry a letter. This makes the 1967 penny part of a very specific and unusual era in U.S. coinage. The design of the coin itself is familiar. On the front, Abraham Lincoln faces to the right, just as he has since 1909. The words "In God We Trust" appear above his head, with liberty to the left and the date, 1967, to the right. On the back, the Lincoln Memorial stands centered, with United States of America and 1 cent surrounding it. But the metal inside this penny tells another important story. The 1967 Lincoln cent is made of 95% copper, with the remaining 5% made up of zinc and tin. This makes it heavier and richer in copper than modern pennies. When you hold one, you are holding a coin from the final years of traditional bronze cents. Because these pennies were made in huge numbers, many people assume they are worthless. In everyday condition, that is mostly true. A worn 1967 penny is usually worth only 1 or 2 cents. But value in coin collecting is not about age alone. It is about condition, rarity within condition, and unusual features. One reason collectors pay attention to the 1967 penny is quality. During the coin shortage, the mint focused on speed, not perfection. Dies wore out faster. Strikes were often weak. Coins were dumped into bags without care. Because of this, truly sharp, well-preserved 1967 pennies are much harder to find than people expect. Another reason is the special mint sets made in 1967. That year, the U.S. Mint did not produce traditional proof coins. Instead, they released special mint sets, often called SMS coins. These coins have a smoother, satin-like finish, sharper details, and better overall appearance than regular circulation strikes. A 1967 penny from a special mint set can look very different from a normal one. The surfaces appear softer and more even. The details in Lincoln's hair and beard are clearer. The Lincoln memorial lines are more defined. These coins were never meant for everyday use, and many were saved by collectors. Some of these SMS pennies have sold for impressive prices. High-grade examples certified by professional grading services have sold at auction for hundreds, and in rare cases, over $1,000. The most valuable examples are those with deep red color, flawless surfaces, and exceptional strike quality. Errors also play a role in value. While major errors are rare, they do exist. Off-center strikes, doubled dies, clipped planchets, and coins struck on defective metal blanks can bring strong interest from collectors. Even a small visible error can turn an ordinary penny into something special. So how do you know if your 1967 penny is worth more than face value? The first step is to look closely. Check the color. Bright red or red-brown pennies are usually worth more than dark brown ones. Copper that has not been heavily oxidized is more desirable. Next, examine the details. Look at Lincoln's hair and coat. Are the lines sharp or worn flat? On the reverse, look at the Lincoln memorial. Can you clearly see the steps and columns? Strong detail often means the coin has seen little circulation. Weight is another clue. A genuine 1967 penny should weigh about 3.11 grams. If it is significantly lighter or heavier, it may be damaged, altered, or something unusual. A simple digital scale can help you check this. Some people worry about fakes, but fake 1967 pennies are uncommon. Because the coin is generally inexpensive, counterfeiters rarely target it. However, altered coins do exist. Sometimes a mint mark from another year is removed to imitate a no mint mark coin. On a real 1967 penny, there should be no sign of tampering under the date. Magnification helps. Under a magnifying glass, the area beneath the date should be smooth and natural. Tool marks or scratches can indicate alteration. If you believe you have a high-quality or unusual example, professional grading can confirm authenticity and condition. There are also some fun and surprising facts about this coin. The 1967 penny was minted the same year the first Super Bowl was played. It circulated during a time of major cultural change in America, including the space race, civil rights movement, and the Vietnam War. Another interesting detail is that copper prices today often make people wonder if these pennies are worth more melted down. While melting coins is illegal, it shows just how much the metal itself has increased in value since 1967. Collectors love the 1967 Lincoln penny because it represents a turning point. It comes from the last full decade of copper pennies. It comes from a time when the mint broke its own traditions. And it reminds collectors that even common coins can carry uncommon stories. For beginners, this penny is affordable and easy to find. For advanced collectors, finding a perfect example becomes a challenge. That combination keeps interest alive. It is a coin that grows with the collector. Today, many people still have 1967 pennies sitting in jars, drawers, or old collections. Most are ordinary, but a few are special. A few survived in excellent condition. A few slipped through with unusual features, and those few are what keep collectors searching. So the next time you see a 1967 Lincoln penny without a mint mark, don't dismiss it too quickly. Take a moment, look closer. Think about the year it was made and the reason it looks the way it does. That small copper coin is a quiet witness to a unique moment in American history, and who knows? The penny you almost ignored might be the one that makes you see everyday coins in a completely new way. Most people would walk right past this penny without a second look. But what if I told you that a simple 1968 Lincoln penny with no mint mark could still be hiding a story that connects American history, everyday change, and real collector demand? A story that might make you look twice at the coins sitting in your pocket right now. The coin we are talking about today is the 1968 Lincoln penny with no mint mark. At first glance, it looks ordinary. Abraham Lincoln's familiar face is on the front. The Lincoln Memorial is on the back. It feels like a coin you have seen your entire life. And that is exactly why it is so fascinating. This penny was struck in 1968, a year that sits right in the middle of major change in the United States. The country was going through political tension, social movements, and economic shifts. Even the U.S. Mint was adjusting how it made coins, how it marked them, and how it prepared for the future. The 1968 penny without a mint mark was produced at the Philadelphia Mint, which traditionally did not use a mint mark on pennies at that time. That missing letter is not a mistake. It is a quiet detail that tells us exactly where the coin was made. To understand this coin, it helps to step back for a moment. The Lincoln cent had already been in circulation for nearly 60 years by 1968. It was first introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th birthday of Abraham Lincoln. By the late 1960s, the design was deeply familiar to Americans. But behind the scenes, important changes were happening. The 1960s were a time when the U.S. Mint was dealing with rising metal prices and increasing demand for coins. People were saving coins, sometimes even hoarding them because silver coins were disappearing from circulation. While pennies were not made of silver, the pressure on the mint affected all coin production. In 1968, the mint was focused on producing large numbers of coins quickly and efficiently to keep up with everyday use. The 1968 penny is made primarily of copper, about 95% copper with a small amount of zinc. This gives it that rich, reddish-brown color when new. Over time, many of these pennies darkened, toned, or developed spots from years of circulation. Finding one today that still has bright original color can be surprisingly difficult. On the front of the coin, you will see Abraham Lincoln facing right. The words "In God We Trust" appear above his head. Liberty is on the left side, and the date 1968 is on the right. There is no mint mark under the date, which tells us it was made in Philadelphia. On the back, the Lincoln Memorial stands tall, with the words "United States of America" across the top and 1 cent at the bottom. If you look closely, you can even see a tiny image of Lincoln seated inside the memorial, a detail many people never notice. So why does this coin matter today? After all, millions of 1968 pennies were made in Philadelphia. On its own, a worn 1968 no-mint mark penny is usually worth just 1 cent. But value in coin collecting is not only about rarity in numbers. It is about condition, details, and sometimes small imperfections that make a coin stand out. One reason collectors pay attention to the 1968 penny is quality. Coins from this era were often struck quickly, and that sometimes led to weak details or small flaws. A 1968 penny with sharp details, clean surfaces, and strong original color can be far more desirable than an average circulated example. Another reason is mint errors. While most 1968 pennies are ordinary, some left the mint with noticeable mistakes. These can include doubled lettering, off-center strikes, or errors where parts of the design appear distorted. These mistakes happened during the minting process and were not intentional. When they are clear and easy to see, collectors often pay strong premiums for them. There have been real auction examples that show this difference clearly. A typical circulated 1968 no-mint mark penny might sell for just a few cents above face value. But a high-grade example, especially one graded by a professional service and showing bright red color, can sell for several dollars or more. In some cases, pennies graded at the very top of the condition scale have sold for hundreds of dollars at auction. These are not everyday finds, but they prove that even a common-looking penny can surprise you. Error coins can bring even more attention. A clearly doubled die example from 1968, where the letters or date appear doubled, can sell for significant amounts depending on how strong the doubling is. Off-center strikes, where the design is noticeably shifted, can also be valuable. The more dramatic and obvious the error, the more collectors are willing to pay. If you are wondering how to identify a real 1968 no-mint mark penny, the first step is simple observation. Look at the date. Make sure it clearly reads 1968. Then check under the date. If there is no letter, no D, and no S, then it was made in Philadelphia. The weight of the coin should feel normal for a penny of that era, and the color should match what you expect from copper. To check for errors, look closely at the letters and numbers. Use a magnifying glass if possible. Look for doubling in words like liberty or in God we trust. Check the date for any signs that the numbers appear doubled or uneven. Also look at how centered the design is. If part of the design is missing or pushed toward one edge, that could be an off-center strike. As for fakes, they are not very common for this coin, simply because most 1968 pennies are not extremely valuable. However, altered coins do exist. Some people add or remove mint marks to try to create something unusual. That is why it is important to look closely at the area under the date. A genuine no mint mark penny should not show signs of tampering, scratches, or tool marks in that area. One fun and surprising fact about the 1968 penny is that it comes from a time when the mint resumed placing mint marks on most coins after a short pause. In the mid-1960s, mint marks were temporarily removed from coins to discourage hoarding. By 1968, mint marks returned to coins made in Denver and San Francisco, but Philadelphia pennies still had no mint mark. This makes the 1968 penny a quiet reminder of that unusual period in U.S. coin history. Another interesting detail is how many people have unknowingly spent high-quality coins. Because pennies are often ignored, some of the best examples may have circulated for years before anyone noticed how nice they were. Even today, collectors still search rolls of pennies hoping to find a sharply struck 1968 example with strong color. Collectors love this coin not because it is flashy or famous, but because it represents everyday America. It is a coin that passed through countless hands during a turbulent time in history. It bought newspapers, candy, stamps, and coffee. It is a small piece of the past that almost everyone has held at some point. For beginner collectors, the 1968 no mint mark penny is approachable. It is easy to find, affordable, and full of small details that teach you how to look closely at coins. For experienced collectors, it offers the challenge of finding top-quality examples or interesting errors that stand out from the millions that were made. So the next time you see a penny dated 1968, do not dismiss it too quickly. Turn it over, check the date, look for that missing mint mark, examine the details. You might be holding a coin that tells a quiet but meaningful story about American history, craftsmanship, and the hidden value in ordinary things. Sometimes, the most interesting treasures are not locked in vaults or displayed in museums. Sometimes, they are hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone curious enough to look a little closer. Imagine reaching into a jar of old pennies, pulling one out at random, and realizing that this small brown coin once passed through American history during one of the most dramatic decades of the 20th century. A single cent that looks ordinary at first glance, yet carries a story tied to the moon landing, the Vietnam War, and a nation in transition. Today, we're exploring the 1969 D mint mark Lincoln penny, a coin that may seem common, but still holds surprises that many people overlook. The 1969 D Lincoln penny is a 1-cent coin struck by the United States Mint in Denver. The small letter D below the date tells us where it was made. Like millions of other Lincoln cents, it features the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the front and the Lincoln Memorial on the back. At face value, it's just a penny. But coins are more than their denomination. They are time capsules, and this one reflects a pivotal moment in American history. To understand this coin, we need to step back into the year 1969. The United States was experiencing profound change. Neil Armstrong had just walked on the moon. Television brought global events into living rooms for the first time. Protests filled the streets, music and culture were evolving rapidly, and the country was redefining itself. Every penny minted that year quietly entered circulation alongside all of this history, traveling through countless hands, pockets, and cash registers. The Lincoln cent itself has a much longer story. It was first introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. This was the first U.S. coin to feature a real person rather than a symbolic figure. By 1969, the Lincoln penny had already been in use for 60 years, making it one of the most familiar coins in American life. The design on the 1969 D penny was created by Victor David Brenner on the front and Frank Gasparo on the back, with the Lincoln Memorial replacing earlier designs starting in 1959. Physically, the 1969 D Lincoln penny is made primarily of copper. At that time, pennies were composed of about 95% copper, with the remaining portion made up of zinc and tin. This is important because just a few years later, rising copper prices forced the U.S. Mint to change the composition. So the 1969 D penny belongs to the final era of classic copper cents, giving it a solid feel and a warm tone that modern pennies simply don't have. On the front of the coin, you'll see Lincoln facing right, with the word Liberty to the left and the date to the right. Below the date is the small D mint mark. Above Lincoln's head is the familiar phrase, "In God we trust." On the back, the Lincoln Memorial stands tall, with the words United States of America across the top and 1 cent along the bottom. If you look closely, you can even see a tiny statue of Lincoln inside the memorial, making this one of the most detailed designs ever used on a U.S. coin. At first glance, the 1969 D penny might seem extremely common, and in many ways it is. The Denver Mint produced hundreds of millions of these coins that year. They were used heavily in everyday commerce, which means most examples today show signs of wear. Because of this high mintage, a typical circulated 1969 D penny is usually worth only a few cents above face value. So why talk about it at all? Because within ordinary coins, extraordinary examples can exist. Condition matters enormously in coin collecting. While worn coins are common, high-quality examples that have never circulated are much harder to find. A 1969 D penny that has been preserved in brilliant, uncirculated condition, with full mint luster and no damage, can be surprisingly valuable to collectors who specialize in high-grade coins. Even more interesting are error coins. Errors are mistakes that happen during the minting process, and they can dramatically increase a coin's value. While the famous double die penny from 1969 comes from the San Francisco Mint, not Denver, the 1969 D penny still has its own share of collectible errors. These can include off-center strikes, clipped planchets where a piece of the coin is missing, weak strikes, or die cracks that leave raised lines across the surface. One particularly appealing error collectors look for is a misaligned die, where the design is not centered properly on the coin. Another is a broad strike, where the coin spreads out wider than normal because it was struck without the collar that usually holds it in place. These errors turn a common penny into a unique artifact, sometimes worth tens, hundreds, or even more dollars depending on how dramatic the mistake is. Auction records show that while most 1969 D pennies sell for modest amounts, top-quality examples can command serious attention. Uncirculated coins graded by professional services in very high mint state levels have sold for impressive prices compared to their face value. Error examples, especially those that are visually obvious and well-preserved, are often the stars of coin shows and online auctions. Of course, with valuable coins come counterfeits and altered pieces. Identifying a real 1969 D Lincoln penny is usually straightforward, but it's still important to be careful. The mint mark should appear just below the date and look natural, not added or scratched in later. Added mint marks are a common trick used to fool beginners. On a genuine coin, the D mint mark is part of the original strike and has the same texture and wear pattern as the rest of the coin. Weight and color can also tell a story. A genuine 1969 D penny should weigh about 3.11 grams and have the rich copper tone typical of that era. If a coin feels unusually light, heavy, or oddly colored, it may have been altered or damaged. Magnification can help you spot unusual tool marks or inconsistencies that suggest tampering. One fascinating detail about the 1969 D penny is how close it came to a major turning point in U.S. coinage. Just a few years later, copper would become too expensive for widespread use in pennies. In 1982, the mint switched to copper-plated zinc. That means the 1969 D penny is part of the last generation of true copper cents that jingled in Americans' pockets for decades. There's also something emotionally powerful about coins from this era. Many people alive today remember using these pennies as children. They bought candy, made phone calls, or were saved in piggy banks. Finding a 1969 D penny today can spark memories and a sense of connection to the past, which is one reason collectors value them beyond just money. Collectors also appreciate the Lincoln Memorial design because it represents a specific chapter in American numismatic history. From 1959 to 2008, this reverse design symbolized stability and tradition. The 1969 D penny sits right in the middle of that era, a quiet witness to cultural upheaval and technological achievement. Another surprising fact is that many 1969 D pennies may still be hiding in plain sight. Because they were so widely circulated, they often turn up in old jars, rolls of pennies, or inherited collections. While most will be common, the thrill of searching comes from knowing that a high-grade or error coin could be waiting to be discovered. Today, collectors love the 1969 D Lincoln penny not because it's the rarest coin ever made, but because it represents the heart of coin collecting. It shows how everyday objects can gain meaning through history, condition, and curiosity. It reminds us that value is not always obvious at first glance. So the next time you see a 1969 penny, don't dismiss it too quickly. Look, imagine finding a single penny in your pocket that quietly carries the story of America in the 1970s, a time of change, uncertainty, and resilience. It looks ordinary. It feels ordinary. But its history is anything but. Today, we're uncovering the true story behind the 1975 no-mint mark Lincoln penny, a coin millions have held without ever realizing what it represents. This coin is a Lincoln 1-cent piece dated 1975, and the reason it has no mint mark is simple but important. It was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, which, at the time, did not place mint marks on pennies. That small detail alone causes confusion for many people today, leading them to wonder if the coin is rare, special, or possibly valuable. To understand the truth, we need to step back into the year it was born. The year 1975 was a complicated time in American history. The country was still recovering from the Vietnam War, dealing with economic uncertainty, rising inflation, and the aftershocks of the early 1970s oil crisis. Everyday items were becoming more expensive, and the humble penny played a real role in daily life. People relied on small change far more than they do today, and the U.S. Mint had to produce enormous quantities of coins just to keep commerce moving. The Lincoln penny itself had already been in circulation for more than 6 decades by 1975. First introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth, it became the first U.S. coin to feature a real historical figure. By the mid-1970s, the design was familiar to every American. On the front, Abraham Lincoln's portrait, designed by Victor David Brenner, remained unchanged. On the back, the Lincoln Memorial stood proudly, symbolizing unity and remembrance. The 1975 no-mint mark penny was made primarily of copper, but not in the way earlier pennies were. Its composition was 95% copper and 5% zinc, a formula that had been used for decades. However, copper prices were rising sharply during this period. The cost of producing a penny was becoming a serious concern for the U.S. government, and discussions were already underway about changing the metal content. Just a few years later, that change would arrive, making the 1975 penny one of the last Lincoln cents made in the traditional copper alloy. Visually, the coin is simple but iconic. Lincoln's profile faces right, with the words "In God We Trust" above his head. Liberty appears to the left, and the date 1975 sits to the right. The absence of a mint mark below the date tells you it came from Philadelphia. On the reverse, the Lincoln Memorial dominates the center, with United States of America and 1 cent clearly visible. If you look closely, you can even see a tiny statue of Lincoln seated inside the memorial. At first glance, this penny may seem incredibly common, and in many ways it is. The Philadelphia Mint produced well over 5 billion Lincoln cents in 1975. That enormous number means most examples found today are not rare in the traditional sense. However, value in coin collecting does not come from age alone. Condition, errors, and unusual variations can transform an everyday penny into something collectors truly care about. One of the main reasons people search for the 1975 no-mint mark penny is the hope of finding an error. Mint errors are mistakes made during the production process, and they can significantly increase a coin's value. In 1975, the minting process was fast and industrial, and small errors slipped through. Some pennies show off-center strikes, where the design is not properly centered. Others may have doubled letters or numbers, known as doubled dies, where parts of the design appear slightly doubled when examined closely. There are also coins with cracks in the metal, weak strikes, or unusual surface marks caused by worn or damaged equipment. While these errors are not common, they do exist, and collectors actively search for them. A standard circulated 1975 penny might be worth only 1 or 2 cents, but a well-preserved coin with a clear and dramatic error can sell for tens, hundreds, or even more, depending on the type and severity of the mistake. Condition plays a huge role in value. A penny that has been circulating for decades will show wear. The copper surface darkens, details soften, and small scratches appear. However, some 1975 pennies were pulled from circulation early or stored carefully. These coins may still show bright red copper luster, sharp details, and minimal wear. Collectors refer to these as uncirculated coins, and they are far more desirable. At auction, high-grade uncirculated 1975 no-mint mark pennies have sold for surprising amounts compared to their face value. Coins graded by professional services in near-perfect condition have reached prices ranging from a few dollars to over $50, depending on grade and eye appeal. Error coins, especially those with strong doubling or major strike issues, have sold for several $100s when verified and authenticated. Identifying a genuine 1975 no-mint mark penny is fairly straightforward. First, check the date carefully. It should clearly read 1975 with no mint mark beneath it. The coin should weigh about 3.11 grams, consistent with copper pennies of that era. A magnet test can also help, as genuine copper pennies are not magnetic. If the coin sticks to a magnet, it may not be authentic or may have been altered. Be cautious of exaggerated claims online. Many altered coins are sold as rare errors when they are simply damaged after leaving the mint. Scratches, dents, and environmental damage can sometimes resemble mint errors, but trained collectors know the difference. If you believe you found something unusual, having the coin examined by a reputable coin dealer or grading service is the safest step. One surprising fact about the 1975 penny is how it sits at a turning point in U.S. coin history. Just a few years later, in 1982, the mint officially changed the penny's composition to mostly zinc with a thin copper coating. That shift makes earlier copper pennies increasingly interesting to collectors who appreciate the feel and weight of traditional coinage. Another fun detail is that many people unknowingly spend valuable coins every day. Pennies like the 1975 no-mint mark often pass through hands without a second thought. Cash registers, jars, and old collections may still hold high-quality examples waiting to be rediscovered. This sense of hidden potential is part of what makes coin collecting so appealing. Collectors today love this coin not because it is extremely rare, but because it represents a familiar piece of American life. It connects everyday people to a specific moment in time. It reminds collectors of an era when pennies mattered, when copper was king, and when small change carried real purchasing power. The 1975 no-mint mark Lincoln penny also serves as a perfect entry point for new collectors. It's affordable, widely available, and rich with learning opportunities. From studying mint errors to understanding grading and condition, this single coin can teach the basics of numismatics in a hands-on way. As you look at your own change, remember that history often hides in plain sight. The next penny you pick up might not make you rich, but it might carry a story worth telling. And sometimes that story is more valuable than money itself. So the next time you see a 1975 penny with no mint mark, don't rush past it. Hold it for a moment. Think about where it's been, the hands it's passed through, and the era it represents. Because even the most ordinary coin can become extraordinary once you know what you're looking at. Most people have held this coin in their hands and never gave it a second thought. It looks ordinary, feels ordinary, and often ends up forgotten in a jar or drawer. But what if I told you that a simple 1978 Lincoln penny with no mint mark can carry a story that connects history, hidden details, and the quiet thrill of discovery? Today we're taking a deep look at the 1978 no mint mark Lincoln penny. This is not a loud or flashy coin. It doesn't scream rarity at first glance. Instead, its value and appeal live in the details, the era it came from, and the surprising reasons collectors still care about it today. The 1978 Lincoln penny is part of the long-running Lincoln cent series, first introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th birthday of Abraham Lincoln. By 1978, this design had already been in circulation for nearly 70 years, making it one of the most familiar coins in American history. When you see a 1978 penny with no mint mark, that tells you something important. It means the coin was made at the Philadelphia Mint. At the time, Philadelphia did not use a mint mark on pennies, so no mint mark is not an error or a mistake. It is actually the normal identifier for coins produced there. In 1978, the United States was going through a period of economic change. Inflation was rising, metal prices were fluctuating, and the country was still adjusting to the end of the silver era in U.S. coinage. Pennies were already made mostly of copper, but cost concerns were becoming a serious issue for the U.S. Mint. That year, hundreds of millions of Lincoln pennies were struck to meet everyday circulation needs. They were meant to be used, spent, dropped into cash registers, and passed from hand to hand. No one at the time thought of them as collectibles. They were simply money. The design of the 1978 Lincoln penny is the classic look many Americans grew up with. On the front, you see Abraham Lincoln facing right, with the words "In God We Trust" above his head. To the left is the word "Liberty," and to the right is the date 1978. On the back, you find the Lincoln Memorial. This design was introduced in 1959 and was used until 2008. If you look closely, you can actually see a tiny statue of Lincoln seated inside the memorial. It's one of the few U.S. coins where the same person appears on both sides. The metal composition of the 1978 penny is also important. It is made of 95% copper and 5% zinc. This gives it a warm, reddish-brown color when new. Over time, many of these pennies darkened or turned brown from circulation, fingerprints, and exposure to air. Collectors often talk about pennies from this era as part of the last copper generation. Just a few years later, in 1982, the U.S. Mint switched to copper-plated zinc pennies to reduce costs. That change makes earlier copper cents, including 1978, more appealing to some collectors. Now here's where things get interesting. On its own, a regular 1978 no-mint mark penny is not rare. Millions were made, and many still exist today. In circulated condition, most are worth only 1 cent. But value in coin collecting is not just about the date. It's about condition, errors, and special characteristics. A 1978 penny that has never been circulated, meaning it still looks close to how it did when it left the mint, can be worth significantly more than face value. Coins graded in high mint state condition can sell for several dollars, and in exceptional cases, much more. Then there are errors. Mint errors are mistakes that happen during the coin-making process, and they are one of the biggest reasons an otherwise common coin can become valuable. Some 1978 pennies were struck off-center, meaning the design is not properly aligned. Others show doubled dies, where parts of the lettering or date appear doubled because of a problem with the die used to strike the coin. There are also pennies with clipped planchets, where a portion of the metal blank is missing, or with weak strikes, where details look unusually soft or flat. These errors are not common, and collectors actively search for them. Real auction records show that error pennies from 1978 have sold for anywhere from $50 to several $100s, depending on the type and severity of the error and the overall condition of the coin. High-grade, non-error 1978 no-mint mark pennies have also appeared in auctions. Coins graded M-66 or M-67 by professional grading services have sold for well over $100, not because they are rare in general, but because finding one in such pristine condition is difficult. So how do you know if you have a real 1978 no-mint mark penny and not something altered or damaged? First, check the weight. A genuine 1978 copper penny should weigh about 3.11 grams. A digital scale can help you spot coins that are underweight or overweight, which may indicate damage or tampering. Next, look closely at the details. The lettering should be clear and sharp, not blurry or uneven unless it's a legitimate mint error. Artificial damage, like scratches or dents, does not add value and can actually reduce it. Be cautious of coins that appear to have been altered to look like errors. For example, some people try to file or grind coins to mimic off-center strikes or clipped edges. These altered coins usually show tool marks or unnatural shapes. Professional grading services are the best way to confirm authenticity and condition if you believe your coin may be valuable. While grading costs money, it can be worth it for coins that appear to be in excellent condition or show unusual features. There are also some fun and surprising details about the 1978 Lincoln penny. For one, it was made during a time when the penny's future was already being questioned. Rising copper prices meant the government was losing money producing each coin. Another interesting fact is that many people unknowingly saved these pennies in rolls or jars, thinking all copper pennies would one day be worth a fortune. While most are not extremely valuable, those old collections sometimes contain hidden gems in high-grade condition. Collectors today love the 1978 no-mint mark penny not because it is rare, but because it represents a familiar piece of everyday American life. It's a coin many people remember using, finding on sidewalks, or counting out for candy or soda. For beginner collectors, it's also an accessible coin. You don't need a large budget to start searching for high-quality examples or interesting errors. It teaches patience, attention to detail, and the idea that value is often hidden in small differences. The 1978 Lincoln penny is a reminder that coin collecting is not always about instant riches. It's about stories, history, and the excitement of looking closely at something most people overlook. So the next time you come across a penny dated 1978 with no mint mark, don't dismiss it too quickly. Take a closer look. Examine the details, check the condition. You might not find a fortune, but you'll be holding a small piece of American history in your hand. And sometimes, the real value isn't just in the price a coin can bring, but in the curiosity it sparks and the stories it invites you to explore. Imagine pulling a penny from your pocket, barely giving it a glance, and then realizing it carries a quiet story from a turning point in American history. A story most people never hear. That's exactly the case with the 1979 no mint mark Lincoln penny, a coin millions have handled, but very few truly understand. This coin may look ordinary at first. It's small, brown, and familiar. But behind that simple appearance is a moment in time when America was changing fast, and the pennies in circulation were changing with it. Today, we're uncovering what makes the 1979 no mint mark Lincoln penny special, what collectors look for, and why some examples are far more valuable than most people expect. The 1979 no mint mark Lincoln penny was struck at the Philadelphia Mint. At that time, pennies made in Philadelphia did not carry a mint mark, which is why this coin appears blank below the date. This often confuses new collectors, but no mint mark simply means it was made in Philadelphia, the oldest and most historic U.S. mint facility. By 1979, the Lincoln cent had already been in circulation for 70 years. First introduced in 1909 to honor Abraham Lincoln's 100th birthday, it was the first U.S. coin to feature a real person. Over time, it became the most widely recognized coin in America, passed from hand to hand through wars, recessions, and cultural shifts. The year 1979 itself sits at an interesting place in history. America was facing high inflation, rising gas prices, and economic uncertainty. Everyday items felt more expensive, and the value of a single penny seemed smaller than ever. Ironically, that pressure is part of why some 1979 pennies are now closely studied by collectors. This penny was made primarily of zinc, with a thin copper coating on the outside. Just a few years earlier, in 1982, the mint officially changed the composition of the cent due to rising copper costs. The 1979 penny represents one of the final years before that transition became permanent. While it still looks like a traditional copper penny, it is lighter than older cents made mostly of copper. The design is classic and instantly recognizable. On the front, Abraham Lincoln faces right, calm, and steady, with the words "In God We Trust" above his head. The date 1979 appears to the right, and the word "Liberty" rests behind him. On the back, you'll see the Lincoln Memorial, a design introduced in 1959. If you look closely, you can even spot Lincoln's statue between the columns, making this one of the few coins in the world to show the same person twice. So why do collectors care about a penny that was minted in such large numbers? The answer lies in condition, errors, and scarcity within abundance. Over 4 billion pennies were made in Philadelphia in 1979. That sounds like a lot, and it is. But most of those coins were heavily used, scratched, darkened, or damaged over time. Finding a 1979 no mint mark penny in near-perfect condition today is far more difficult than people realize. Coins that were never circulated, never cleaned, and never mishandled are rare survivors. Collectors pay close attention to sharp details, original color, and clean surfaces. Even more exciting are error coins. These are mistakes made during the minting process, and they are where value can rise dramatically. Some 1979 pennies show off-center strikes, where the design is shifted to one side. Others have weak strikes, missing details, or doubled lettering that appears slightly shadowed. One of the most talked-about varieties is the 1979 doubled die penny. In these cases, parts of the lettering or date appear doubled due to a misalignment during the die creation process. These are subtle and often missed, but trained collectors can spot them with magnification. Genuine doubled die examples can sell for hundreds, and in top condition, even more. There are also wrong planchet errors, where the penny was struck on the wrong type of metal blank. These are extremely rare, but when authenticated, They can bring strong prices at auction because they represent a clear mistake that escaped quality control. When it comes to real-world values, most circulated 1979 no-mint mark pennies are worth face value. That's the honest truth, but uncirculated examples tell a different story. A well-preserved coin graded by a professional service can sell for $10, $20, or more, depending on its quality. High-grade examples with strong luster and no visible wear have sold at auction for surprising amounts. Error coins, especially doubled dies or dramatic off-center strikes, have reached prices from several $100s to well over $1,000. These are not everyday finds, but they do exist, and they continue to surface in old collections and rolls. Knowing how to identify a real coin versus a fake or altered one is important. First, check the weight. A standard 1979 penny should weigh about 2.5 grams. If it's significantly heavier or lighter, that could be a red flag or, in rare cases, a valuable error. Next, look closely at the details. Real mint errors usually show smooth, natural metal flow. Fake errors often look rough, scratched, or artificially altered. Be cautious of coins that appear too damaged or deliberately modified. Magnification is your best friend. A simple jeweler's loupe can reveal doubling, cracks, or unusual textures. If a coin seems special, professional grading and authentication is the safest way to confirm its value. Here's a surprising fact many people don't know. Even though pennies feel insignificant today, the Lincoln cent remains one of the most collected coins in American history. Millions of collectors started their hobby by filling penny albums, and the 1979 penny is often one of the dates that brings back childhood memories. Another fun detail is that pennies from this era often show different shades of color. Some are bright red, others brown, and many fall somewhere in between. That color difference plays a role in value, with bright, original red coins being the most desirable. Collectors love the 1979 no-mint mark penny not because it's flashy, but because it represents the everyday life of Americans at the end of the 1970s. It's a coin that bought candy, made phone calls, and filled change jars during a time of economic challenge and cultural change. It's also a reminder that rarity doesn't always mean low mintage. Sometimes rarity comes from survival, condition, and attention to detail. A coin struck in the billions can still become special when preserved against the odds. Today, collectors continue searching rolls, jars, and old collections for high-grade examples and hidden errors. The thrill isn't just about money. It's about discovery, history, and the possibility that something ordinary might be extraordinary. So the next time you see a 1979 penny with no mint mark, don't dismiss it too quickly. Take a closer look. Check the details. Think about where it's been and what it's seen. That small coin may not change your life, but it might change the way you see the change in your pocket. Because sometimes, the most interesting stories in American history aren't written in books. They're quietly carried in the smallest coins, waiting for someone curious enough to notice. Imagine pulling a penny from your pocket and realizing it might belong to one of the most confusing and surprising years in U.S. coin history. A penny that looks ordinary, feels ordinary, yet could be hiding a story that collectors still argue about decades later. That penny could be the 1982 D Lincoln cent. The 1982 D mint mark Lincoln penny is one of those coins most people have seen, but very few truly understand. At first glance, it looks like any other Lincoln penny. Abraham Lincoln's familiar profile faces right on the front, and the Lincoln Memorial sits calmly on the back. But behind this simple design is a year of change, uncertainty, and unexpected rarity. This coin was made in 1982 at the Denver Mint, which is why it carries the small D mint mark just below the date. During this time, the United States was facing rising metal costs. Copper had become expensive, and the U.S. Mint was under pressure to find a cheaper way to produce 1-cent coins. What happened next turned 1982 into one of the most important transition years in Lincoln penny history. For decades, pennies were made mostly of copper, but in 1982, that changed. The mint officially switched from copper-based pennies to zinc pennies coated with a thin layer of copper. This decision was all about saving money. Zinc was much cheaper, and the new pennies cost less to produce than the coin's face value. What makes 1982 so special is that the change did not happen all at once. Instead, the mint produced multiple versions of the penny during the same year. Both copper and zinc pennies were made. Large date and small date styles were used, and both the Philadelphia Mint and the Denver Mint were producing coins at the same time. That means there isn't just one 1982 penny. There are several different varieties, and the 1982 D penny plays a key role in this complex story. The Denver Mint produced pennies with a D mint mark, but officially, all 1982 D pennies were supposed to be made from the new zinc composition. They were also made with both large date and small date designs. Most of the 1982 D pennies you'll find today are zinc coins and are very common. But here's where the mystery begins. Collectors believe that at least a tiny number of 1982 D pennies were accidentally struck on leftover copper planchets. These would be copper pennies with a D mint mark and a small date. According to official mint records, these coins were never meant to exist. And yet, a few examples have surfaced over the years, sending shockwaves through the coin-collecting world. This possibility alone makes the 1982 D penny one of the most searched Lincoln cents today. To understand why, you need to look at the physical details of the coin. The design itself is classic. Abraham Lincoln appears on the front, a design first introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of his birth. His expression is calm and thoughtful, a symbol of stability during a time when America itself was changing. On the reverse side, the Lincoln Memorial design shows the famous monument in Washington, D.C., with Lincoln's statue visible between the columns. This design was used from 1959 until 2008, making it instantly recognizable to millions of Americans. The real difference with the 1982 D penny is not the design, but the metal and the details in the date. Copper pennies from earlier years weigh about 3.11 grams. Zinc pennies weigh much less, about 2.5 grams. That small difference in weight is one of the most important clues collectors use to identify valuable examples. A simple digital scale can tell you whether a penny is copper or zinc in seconds. The date style also matters. In 1982, the mint used both large date and small date punches. The small date has thinner numbers, especially noticeable in the 2 and the 8. The large date has thicker, more rounded numbers. To an untrained eye, they look similar. To a collector, they make all the difference. Most 1982 D small date pennies are zinc. That's normal. That's expected. But a 1982 D small date penny made of copper is the one collectors dream about. Why is it valuable? Because it wasn't supposed to exist. When a coin breaks the rules of its own production, collectors pay attention. These accidental coins are known as transitional errors. They happen when old materials are mistakenly used after a change has already been approved. In the case of the 1982 D penny, copper blanks may have been left in the system and struck with new dies. Only a very small number of these coins are believed to exist. Some experts think fewer than 10 genuine examples have ever been confirmed. Each new discovery is examined closely, authenticated by professional grading services, and documented carefully. When verified examples appear, they create intense interest. Certified specimens have been privately sold and insured for 5-figure amounts, sometimes higher depending on condition. Because so few exist, public auction records are limited, which only adds to the mystery and excitement. Even regular 1982 D pennies can have value beyond face value if they show unusual errors. Off-center strikes, double strikes, or strong doubling in the lettering can attract collectors. These errors are not unique to 1982, but the transition year makes every unusual example worth a closer look. Of course, with high interest comes the risk of fakes. Some people try to alter coins by plating zinc pennies or modifying dates. That's why weight is so important. A real copper penny will weigh around 3.11 grams, not just look copper-colored. Professional authentication is essential for any coin believed to be rare. Reputable grading companies use precise measurements, metal analysis, and microscopic inspection to confirm authenticity. If someone ever claims to have a rare 1982 D copper penny, testing is not optional. It's required. One surprising fact about the 1982 penny is that no other year has so many official varieties. Between copper and zinc, large date and small date, and different mints, collectors recognize 7 main varieties. This alone makes 1982 a favorite year for beginners and advanced collectors alike. Another fun detail is sound. Copper pennies make a clear ringing sound when dropped, while zinc pennies sound dull. It's not a scientific test, but many collectors still use it as a quick first check. Collectors today love the 1982 D penny because it represents a turning point. It marks the end of the traditional copper cent and the beginning of the modern zinc era. It tells a story of economic pressure, manufacturing challenges, and human error. It also reminds people that valuable coins don't always look old or impressive. Sometimes, the most interesting pieces of history are hiding in plain sight, mixed in with everyday change. For many collectors, the thrill isn't just about money. It's about discovery. It's about holding a small piece of... Most people have held this coin in their hands without ever giving it a second thought. It looks ordinary. It feels common. And yet, hidden in plain sight, the 1988 Lincoln penny with no mint mark has a story that surprises even experienced collectors. What seems like loose change can sometimes reveal history, mystery, and in very specific cases, unexpected value. This coin is the 1988 Lincoln 1-cent piece struck without a mint mark. At first glance, that may not sound special at all. In fact, millions of Americans carried these pennies in their pockets, dropped them into jars, or spent them at grocery stores without ever realizing what they were holding. But as with many U.S. coins, the real story begins once you slow down and take a closer look. The Lincoln penny has been part of American life since 1909, created to honor the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. By 1988, the design was already familiar to generations of Americans. On the front of the coin, Abraham Lincoln's profile faces to the right, strong and calm, just as it had for decades. On the back, you see the Lincoln Memorial, a design that was used from 1959 until 2008. By 1988, this penny represented both tradition and continuity in U.S. coinage. The year 1988 sits in an interesting period of American history. The Cold War was nearing its end. Technology was advancing rapidly, and the U.S. Mint was producing coins at a massive scale to meet everyday demand. That year, pennies were struck at multiple facilities, including Philadelphia and Denver. Coins from Denver carry a small D mint mark. Coins from Philadelphia carry no mint mark at all. So when you see a 1988 penny with no mint mark, it means it was made in Philadelphia just as intended. These pennies were not made as collectibles. They were made for circulation, to be used in daily life. In fact, hundreds of millions of 1988 pennies without a mint mark were produced. Because of that, most examples are still only worth face value. But that does not mean the coin is uninteresting. Far from it. What makes the 1988 no mint mark Lincoln penny fascinating is what can happen when small differences appear during the minting process. To understand that, it helps to look at how the coin is made. By 1988, pennies were no longer solid copper. Instead, they were made of a zinc core coated with a thin layer of copper. This change happened in 1982 to reduce costs. The 1988 penny weighs about 2.5 grams and has a bright copper appearance when well preserved. Over time, many of these coins darkened, scratched, or corroded, especially if the copper coating was damaged. The design itself offers many small details that collectors study closely. On the front, you can see the word Liberty to the left of Lincoln's portrait and the date to the right. Above Lincoln's head is the familiar phrase, "In God we trust." On the reverse, the Lincoln Memorial stands centered, with the words United States of America and 1 cent framing it. If you look closely between the columns of the memorial, you can even see a tiny image of Lincoln seated inside. So why would anyone care about a 1988 penny with no mint mark if so many were made? The answer lies in errors, condition, and collector demand. While the average circulated example is common, certain 1988 pennies stand out because of mistakes that occurred during production. These errors can turn an everyday coin into something collectors actively search for. One of the most well-known varieties from this year is the 1988 double-die reverse penny. On these coins, parts of the lettering on the back appear doubled, especially the words United States of America and 1 cent. This doubling is not caused by damage or wear. It happens when the coin die itself is improperly made, creating a repeated image. These double-die coins are much scarcer than regular strikes and are highly sought after. When such an error is clearly visible and the coin is in good condition, its value can rise dramatically compared to face value. Collectors have paid tens, hundreds, and in top-condition cases, even more for verified examples of the 1988 double-die reverse penny. The key is authenticity and preservation. Condition plays a major role in value. A 1988 no-mint mark penny that has never been circulated, meaning it shows no wear and still has its original luster, is far more desirable than one that has been heavily used. Professional grading services examine coins under magnification and assign grades that reflect their condition. High-grade examples can sell for significantly more than average circulated ones, even without major errors. There have been real auction sales that show this difference clearly. While most 1988 Philadelphia pennies sell for just a few cents or dollars in bulk, certain high-grade or error examples have sold for impressive amounts. Certified double-die reverse coins have appeared at major coin auctions and online marketplaces, sometimes selling for hundreds of dollars depending on clarity and condition. These are not everyday prices, but they demonstrate what collectors are willing to pay for something truly special. Because value depends so much on small details, knowing how to identify a real coin is important. First, check the date and mint mark area carefully. A genuine 1988 Philadelphia penny will have no letter below the date. Next, look at the weight. A standard 1988 penny should weigh around 2.5 grams. Significant differences could indicate damage or alteration. Use a magnifying glass to inspect the lettering on both sides. True double-die errors show clear separation, not blurry or smeared lines. Be cautious of coins that appear altered. Some people try to create fake errors by scratching, grinding, or reshaping letters. These alterations usually look rough and uneven under magnification. Authentic mint errors have smooth, rounded features that match the rest of the design. When in doubt, serious collectors rely on third-party grading services to confirm authenticity. There are also fun and surprising details about the 1988 Lincoln penny that many people do not know. For example, because of the zinc core, if the copper coating is damaged, the coin can corrode from the inside. This is why some pennies from the 1980s look swollen or bubbly. Another interesting fact is that billions of Lincoln Memorial pennies were melted or destroyed over time, making high-quality survivors harder to find than you might expect. Collectors today are drawn to coins like the 1988 no-mint mark penny, not because they are instantly valuable, but because they represent the idea that history can be hiding in plain sight. These coins remind people that even ordinary objects can carry stories, mistakes, and moments frozen in time. Searching through pocket change or old jars becomes a kind of treasure hunt, fueled by curiosity rather than guaranteed profit. For many collectors, the joy comes from the search itself. Finding a clean, well-preserved example, or better yet, spotting a real error variety, creates excitement that goes beyond money. It connects people to the past, to the craftsmanship of the U.S. Mint, and to a shared national history that fits in the palm of your hand. As you think about the 1988 Lincoln penny with no mint mark, remember this. Most are common, most are simple, but a few tell a different story, a story of mistakes, survival, and careful observation. The next time you come across an old penny, take a moment before you spend it. Look closely, because sometimes the most ordinary coin can still surprise you, and the real value lies in knowing what to look for.